Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, any public comment? No, okie dokie, moving
No
on to the
public comment.
discussion. Awesome, thank you. Moving on to discussion items, budget work study, turning over to Dr. Deloria and Ms. Van Rapport.
Good evening, everyone. I don't know if Dr. Deloria had anything to say before we start, but the purpose.
Go ahead.
Okay, good. So the purpose of tonight is to take a look at how our 2021 budget is shaping up and I have an opportunity to discuss that. I will start sharing my screen. I have a presentation. So the format for today is open. You can ask questions during any point at any time. If you need clarification on anything, please feel free to let me know. Because I'm presenting, I will only be able to see some of your faces. So if you're waving, I might not see you. So just hop right in. So as I said tonight, the goal is to increase knowledge and understanding of the district budget, to give an update on our financial projections as we know it as of today, and consider and discuss the components of our 2021 budget. It's a very difficult time to project what's going to happen. The projections that are being given tonight are very conservative based on recommendations from the San Mateo County Office of Ed and School Services and FCMAT. I'm not showing you the worst case scenario, but it definitely could turn out better than what I'm showing you here. Like I said, a conservative approach just to make sure that we are setting the district up for being financially responsible. The other piece that is unknown is the effects of this COVID-19 situation. We don't fully understand everything that's going to be impacted in our budget from this pandemic. So with that in mind, we'll just look at this current year, the 1920 year, and where it seems like we will be ending up. So we just had our second interim report in March, and then the whole world changed. And so since second interim, there have been some notable changes. On the revenue side, School Services and the County Office of Ed are warning that any money we have not received yet from the state of California, other than the LCFF formula, might not come. So SB 117 only protected the LCFF formula. It did not protect all of the other all of the other state funds. And for us, the money that we have not received yet is about half of our lottery funds and all of the low performing student block grant. So those two combine to about $550,000 that we don't know if we will get yet. Additional impacts since the second interim report are site rentals at the school sites. We had to shut down in March, and so that's a loss of about $200,000. And our rentals at Ceremony Del Rey, we have been charging only 25% of rent each month that were shut down because they can't hold their events. So we have a loss there. And then Daly City Youth Health Center fundraising is coming in under what was projected. Their expenses are also coming in under what is projected. So I'm not worried that their budget won't be balanced, but it is an impact to our local revenue. On the expenditure side, for the increases, we had an increase in the timesheets that have been projected to the end of the school year. And part of that was due to the COVID situation with more teachers and staff having to come in to be trained and to do above and beyond activities. Some of it was not. The other things that were COVID related were our food service program. We're going to see an increase of about $130,000 through the end of 1920. And if we continue food service over the summer, that impact will be even higher. The places where we have had decreases since second interim is our gas and electric bill. We're going to save about $300,000 from having the school shut down. A chunk of the athletic costs for the end of the school year from all the trips that weren't taken. Some of our overtime and our substitute costs and supplies. While we're spending more on cleaning supplies, disinfectants, it's the day-to-day supplies like toilet paper and soap for the bathrooms, those kind of things we don't need as much of. So we're having a net savings. And so overall, the impact from both the revenue and expenditure side together works out to about $190,000 loss between what was projected at second interim to what we're looking at now. There was, and this is constantly changing. So yesterday, after I had finished this presentation, yesterday EdSource came out with estimates of what we will be getting from the federal government in the CARES Act. And it's being allocated through the Title I formula. So it is varying dramatically from district to district. They estimate that LA will get about $770,000, I'm sorry, $770 per student. So that will be millions of dollars. While Pacifica is one of the lowest ones, they're only going to get $27 per student, according to EdSource. In JUHSD, we are projected to get $87 per student, which comes out to about $350,000. And again, we have gotten nothing official, but that's what EdSource is projecting. But that $350,000 will help make up some of the other losses. And that's not included in this because, like I said, it's changing every day. So with those new numbers, here is what the breakdown comes out to for revenue. About 77% of our revenue coming from our property taxes, and only 3% from federal, 5% in other state, and 15% in local. The comparison to last year, you can see that the local service is now a bigger piece of the pie, and that's because of the parcel tax. This is the first year that our new parcel tax is in effect. And the other state is a smaller piece of the pie, and that's primarily due to the COVID-19. And we may still receive those funds. We're just been told not to count on them. So our enrollment this year is about 4,298 with about 95% attendance. So that's gives us an ADA of 4,083. So our total revenue per ADA is about $15,369. And if you just compare our state, our taxes and what we get in the little piece of the formula that we still get, we have about $11,900 per ADA in that formula compared to if we were still getting LCFF formula, it would only be about $10,314. Moving on to the expenditure side, about 72% of this year's budget is projected to be in salary and benefits, 17% in services and operations, 7% other, and 4% in books and supplies. Comparing that to last year, the services and operations piece has gotten a little bigger, and that's primarily in special education. And then the increase in the other category is primarily our food service program. That was why that increased for that piece of the pie. And we are running a deficit this year, which has been compounded by the fact that we may not be getting all of the funds that we thought we would. Any questions so far about how this year is shaping up? Because I'm going to move on to next year.
Question. So the food service, the increase in food service costs, is that mostly salaries or actual food?
It's both. I would
Both.
say it is more salaries than food, but it is really from when we hired Chartwells, they
Okay.
recommended that we made those extra hirings that
Mhm.
we just now kind of undid in a recent board meeting. And so next year that shouldn't be a big deficit for the
Okay.
food service program.
All right.
Tina,
Thank you.
isn't it also true that we didn't take in any revenue from food service in parts of March, April, and into May? So usually we were collecting some revenue.
Yeah, so it's been compounded by so we had a problem already with our partners in, our partnership with Chartwells. And then on top of that, it's gotten worse, compounded by the COVID situation, yes. Okay. So moving on to 2021. This is a picture of what I have worked on projecting for our tax revenue. Being that we are not an LCFF formula district, we are a basic aid or community funded district, we get more property taxes than the formula would give us. So this is what we really need to watch in order to project our income. At second interim, we had projected that we would have 2.4% of an increase in revenue from property taxes. So this chart is how much increase from the previous year. So we thought this year would end at 2.4% increase over last year, but it's going to be closer to 3%. So that's good news. We had projected that going forward, we would see continued increases in the realm that we've seen before, between 3 and 6%. So we went with 4. But now with this COVID situation, the controller's office met with all of us districts, and they said that we should be able to count on at least 2% in our secured property taxes. So the property taxes come in a couple different buckets. They come in secured, which is the biggest bucket, unsecured, and what's the other one? RDA, Redevelopment Act. So the secured taxes, the controller's office believes that those will be stable, at least at the 2% that is legislated, right? They can increase everybody's taxes by 2% regardless of Prop 13. So they think that we'll see a 2% increase for at least 2 years before the full impacts of any kind of economic downturn would be felt. And then they're not guaranteeing anything. It could be a negative, which we did see in the last recession. So I'm projecting 0 for 22-23, but it could be negative if the impacts of this recession are strong. So counting on a 2% increase in the secured taxes and a 0% increase in the other taxes, that comes out to an 1.8% increase for 2021 and 2022. So that's what I'm using as the prediction right now in the numbers that you see going forward in this presentation. They could very likely come in better than this if the economic hit from the pandemic is not as bad as some are predicting. But hopefully they wouldn't come in worse, especially, I mean, the controller's office went so far as to say, like, they pretty much guarantee it for 2021, that it's not, they've already set rates for that year. So the other budget assumptions, so property taxes I talked about, 0% COLA is what school services is saying is the best case scenario. So for LCFF districts, they're saying that it could be a negative 10% COLA would be what they're saying the worst case scenario would be. So I did assume a 0% COLA for federal income, and then for other state, I assumed a 0% on top of the reductions that I assumed in 1920. So that's really a 25% decrease in our other state. So I think that that's, you know, we've heard the governor say expect a 20% decrease, words like that. So I think this is a conservative approach. The local revenue, I did anticipate an additional 10% decrease beyond what I decreased in 1920. And that's to cover the first half of the year that we're expecting that rentals will still not be able to happen. I'm hoping and assuming in this projection that we will be able to start charging rental fees again by December. So hopefully that's the case. And for our expenditures, there are some increases that we have no control over. STRS and PERS will increase for our district about $630,000. Step and column, which is just everybody moving along on the salary schedule, is about $270,000. And those things combined increase our payroll costs. We have to pay, you know, all of the different pieces, FICA and workers' comp, et cetera. And so the payroll costs will go up $310,000 estimated. I also assumed no increase to health benefits. The decreases that I assumed are things that I think are realistic. And I'll talk more later in the presentation about how I think we can realize these decreases. But I assumed a $700,000 decrease in our expenses for materials and supplies, as well as a $580,000 decrease in our services and professional development and our contracts. And I did assume that the food service program would get closer to what we used to be, but I didn't take us all the way back. So before we had our partnership with Chartwell's, it was about $150,000 to $180,000 a year that we were contributing. This year, it's going to be close, I don't even know, $800,000, something like that. And so I assume $250,000 for next year, because we don't know if the start of the school year, if we're going to be able to have regular lunches. So that's what I assumed. So you'll see later when I show the multi-year projection, but all of these assumptions together put us at a 3.65 reserve, which is not a super healthy place to be, but it is allowable. 3% is the minimum reserve that we can have and still be considered to be a positive certification. So with these assumptions, any increase in expenditure will have to be offset by either a decrease in expenditure or some new revenue. So there are potentials for new revenue to come on, but just to make it clear that with these assumptions, any change in the negative direction will have to be counteracted. So with those assumptions, this is not that different than what we have seen, what we're seeing for this year. You see the decrease in the services, I'm sorry, in the local and other state. And you see that with assuming a zero COLA for LCFF, you see that our gap between our revenue for what we'll get from my assumptions and if we were an LCFF formula is growing, but that's assuming a zero COLA. It would be even further if I went with the worst case scenario. And then for our expenditures, you see, again, a similar pie with the salary and benefits becoming a little bit bigger percentage, while the services and books and supplies become a little smaller. We still have a deficit, but it's not as dramatic as this year's deficit. So this piece is what my recommendations are for trying to keep things under control for 2021 without dramatic changes. I recommend that we limit our professional development and travel, that we require a high level of approval for professional development. So right now, the sites get some professional development money and they can send teachers places, I think we should pull most of that back to the district office and have there be district office oversight on professional development, and that we do not reimburse for out-of-town travel, and that we learn locally, learn from each other, and take this opportunity to do that. That we have a high level of monitoring on purchasing. So right now, again, sites and budget directors have a lot of autonomy in how their budgets are spent. I think that if we were to have a little bit more oversight where they have to talk to somebody and explain why they're making this large purchase, that it would bring us into a little bit lower spending, and that we help the budget managers all maximize the use of restricted funds first. So that's something we definitely can get better at as a district. We often have carryover in some of the restricted funds while we've spent all of the general funds, and flipping that would help the budget be a little tighter. And then I recommend that we strictly limit food and materials for meetings, that we, do potluck, everybody bring a snack to share, things like that. It doesn't sound like a big change, but it would make a big impact. I also recommend that we limit extra pay. Again, this is just adding a layer of oversight when there are projects that need to be done or overtime that needs to be approved, to make sure that we're just doing what is essential. Same thing with hiring, that anytime there becomes a vacancy, that cabinet looks at it closely and sees if that vacancy really needs to be filled. And again, a similar thing with subs, contracts, retirees. We're often hiring people to help us with activities, testing EL students, or planning an event or something like that. And so trying to make sure that we are only doing that when we absolutely need to. And then closely monitoring our leave tracking. So when teachers are absent and they get a sub, it's really easy. We always know and we track that leave, but it's a little more difficult in positions where they don't have subs, and making sure that people are really being held accountable. So none of this is draconian. None of this is dramatic changes. I think it's just making sure that we can meet the budget expectations that I've set forth of the decrease with our contracted and professional development, the 5,000s, and our materials purchases. So if we do a good job of this, the better we do at this, the less impact we'll have to feel in the coming years. So when you save money in 1 year, that compounds, it actually saves, like $1 saved this year is $2 next year. It's I think it's really important. And also looking historically, our district does have a history of being able to spend less. So over the last year, the last 2 years, we've spent more in these areas than we did in the previous years. So I think that these are very reasonable and realistic savings that we should be able to do. Any questions on this or comments before I move on to the multi-year projection?
I have some questions.
Yeah.
So well, there's no reimbursement for travel, but if someone gets approval for PD, outside PD, and they have to drive to it, can they get mileage for it? Or is that a case-by-case basis?
So I think it would have to be a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
There are some people who are willing to take that travel on themselves when it's something that they really want to attend. But if it's something that we're requiring them to attend, yes, we would still reimburse. And that would have to be part of the decision-making in when we're deciding whether to send this person or not.
Okay, because whenever we look over, the monthlies, I'm seeing reimbursement for mileage and things like that.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. That when we require someone to go somewhere, we would have to pay for that mileage.
Okay, and then are there travel related costs right now for sports? I mean, if it's transportation,
The
that's already
buses.
included.
Yeah, that wasn't what I meant. It was,
That's not what you meant.
no.
Okay, I see.
thank you for clarifying. No, it's really what I mean is travel
Mhm.
for professional development.
Okay, okay. And then, so are we going to, when under subs, contracts, and retiree, who, what's the definition of an essential employee?
So that would be, so like a teacher in a classroom where you have to have an adult there with a credential.
Okay.
So we would have to replace that person. But sometimes if a vice principal is out, sometimes we'll have a retiree come in and help out. And maybe that's
Okay.
not essential because there are other VPs or there are,
Right.
yeah.
Again, okay, so, but that's just subs to replace essential employees on leave, not a case where someone calls in sick and needs a sub.
That's
totally
also,
different.
yeah. So that's sick leave.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. And is there, I'm glad we're going to closely manage workers' comp claims. But is there, how prevalent is leave abuse? I mean, I
think that, it's really unknown, and that's why it's more of we need to know so that we can tell if it is happening or not, because pretty much every school has a different way of doing it. And that's probably not the best practice. I think we should standardize that and really make sure that people have accountability.
okay.
And,
That's all I have. Yeah.
It could be that we find no leave abuse, but right now we just don't know.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Can I speak to that workers' comp?
Yes.
So I don't know, I could be wrong, but I don't think there's a ton of abuse. Phyllis and I meet with SMCSIG and Keenan quarterly, and we go over all of the open claims. So I think, there are certainly outliers, but I don't think there's rampant abuse.
Tony, do you think that, can we bring that into a closed session and look at those lists of claims? I think the board would find that interesting. We used to do that in my prior districts. We would periodically share that with the board, but in closed session.
Yeah.
Right.
So my questions were, before we get into multi-year, I guess, is just looking at the deficit spending, how much of this is special education versus everything else?
Wait, no, there we go. I'm going back and forth on mute. So the special education costs this year have gone up from last year, about $2 million. I haven't done a close analysis of this, of whether we've gotten some new kids in that have higher needs, if we have hired a new teacher that had many years of experience that replaced a lower teacher. So I haven't done the analysis of that to know exactly why. But, every year it goes up a little bit, but a 2 million jump in 1 year was more than what was expected. I guess I don't have more answer than that as far as how much of the deficit is special education. I would say from what I budgeted, it's probably like 1.5 million, because I budgeted like a $500,000 increase and it turned out to be a 2 million increase.
And so that's what I'm thinking about in terms of looking at like our considerations for 2021. None of this includes anything about special education. So I don't know how much of an impact it's going to make. Yeah.
Oh, just to jump in. So the contracts is a big part of special education. So
I see.
all of our non-public school placements, all of our tuition, all of our contracted employees, any special person we're hiring to give tutoring help or any of those extra services all come under contracts. So that's where I think that the bulk of the increase in special education was, whether it was tuition or whether it was, special services, I don't know. We have to look at that a little bit closer, and Corinne and I have started already talking about trying to pinpoint some of that. But I do think that that is covered in this contracts box. That is where I think we could try to mitigate some of the impacts of special education.
Okay, and so that my concern is, how do we do that and still continue by service, because we felt like we needed this service, and then once we provide something, especially in special ed, it's hard to then reverse and take it away, especially if it's in an IEP. So I know you're looking into it, so at some point it would be nice to have like a fiscal breakdown of special ed, so that we can take a look at that. And then also, I know we had an audit before of placement and ensuring that everyone is placed properly and we're not spending money that we shouldn't, and that we did bring some non-public school students back. That was supposedly supposed to, that was the purpose, to save money, and it's always good to have folks closer to home, but then staffing. So it's just because, like, when we brought them back, did it actually save money, or did it cause increases because we had to hire more people because of the staffing issues? Like, breakdowns that way would be,
yeah, that's a great idea. I think we should do a deeper dive into that, so we can work on that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Since we were talking about special, is there any way to save money on maybe transportation by chance, like special ed, because that'd be kind of high? And then also, as far as I just have a question about, because we're saying, oh, well, maybe we'll save money about stipends when we're hiring. Is that like, oh, if they have like a master's, then they get like the extra, like incentive? Or are we talking about like the hiring bonuses? Oh, if you join, if you get hired here, then we'll give you that extra $5,000-$10,000 a year. Like, which part would it be? And then so the only thing is, if that is going to be something we're going to cut, then I would be concerned about it, only because it's worked really well this year. I know Tony was like saying, oh my God, we got so many people, like to come and work for us because of the hiring bonus. So I definitely would hate to see that go away, because we're trying to save money, because are we going to save money if we're not going to get the quality teachers that we need and then get the turnovers? So it's like, I guess it's like, yes, we want to save money, but is it like, if we keep that there, what's the value of it? If we do try to stretch it out and leave it there, and then maybe cut it some other ways, such as potluck. So anyway.
Yeah, we have talked about this not being any dramatic switch in things that we've already committed to. So I would recommend that we do keep the hiring bonuses. I think that they have been very effective. I think that we may need to look at that for the following year, for 21-22, but that we have time to think about that. The extra work and the extra stipends that I'm talking about are things like, I don't know, sometimes Corinne will have something that needs to be done, like a bunch of kids need to be tested for their English language proficiency, and we run up against a deadline, and so we have to bring more people in and pay them more to do that. So we'll do our best to not run up against the deadline and do it with the staff that we currently have. Or if there's some kind of a math curriculum study project that needs to be done, maybe it doesn't need to be done this year. Maybe we can think about trying to wait until there's some money specifically for that kind of work.
Or maybe we could just keep doing the bonuses until the housing opens up, and then, because that'll be like just already a huge incentive, so you don't need to do that. monetary incentive. And then so, oh, I'm sorry, now to go back to the transportation for,
Yeah,
for special
we
ed.
definitely, last year, Marcus and Christy Ploget looked at if there were routes that we were contracting out. So that's where a lot of the transportation costs come, is when we have a single student in a single neighborhood going to a school that nobody else goes to. And so, you know, that student, it does cost more to just transport one student every day. So we looked to see if there were any of those routes that we could bring back into our district personnel. And I think we did end up hiring one more driver. And so we brought some of that back, but that needs to be looked at again in every year. And I think there's definitely room for improvement there.
Thanks, Tina.
Yeah.
Tina, have you determined with regards to purchasing what the certain value might be when we're talking about those types of purchases?
I haven't. I was thinking that we would talk with principals to see about setting something. My initial, you know, instinct is maybe $500. But I want to hear, you know, what are the regular purchases that they're making, and what do they think would be reasonable?
That makes sense. I mean, what you're describing in general with these 6 boxes are really just more of a tightening of behavioral change, right? You know, it's easy in good times to sort of let things go in any business entity. And so I think a little bit of tightening and tightening of procedures, and I think the idea of having some set district-wide procedures as opposed to each school on its own, I think is pretty critical. So I like the thinking behind this.
All right, then I will move on to our multi-year projection. So this is if we have those tax revenues that I listed, the 1.8%, 1.8%, and then 0% increases. And if we have 0% COLA on federal and state revenue, so flat funding pretty much is what we're talking about. If we have flat funding and we don't do anything beyond what I just mentioned, cutting around 500,000 in contracts and 700,000 in materials. If we do nothing else, then we will be short in the coming years with flat funding. Now, that's the information we have right now. What this shows is that in 21-22, we're short about 1.2 million from making the minimum reserve of 3%. And then in 22-23, again, if nothing were to change, then we would actually be negative. Yeah, I think I already told all that stuff. So this is what this looks like right now, is that our multi-year projection tells us that with the current information, we would have to identify cuts of about 1.25 million in 21-22 and an additional 1.25 million in 22-23 in order to be able to file a positive status. The way the county office does it is that you don't have to actually make the cuts, but you have to identify realistic cuts that could potentially be made when you do your budget. So for 2021, we have to give 2021 plus 2 more years, and we have to show that we're positive in all of those years. And so if we want to file a positive certification, we'll have to identify realistic things that we could cut. I'm not saying we should do that today. Just want to make sure that you understand that that's where we're at this snapshot. So the May revise information should be available by May 17th. I don't know if it's going to have anything different than what we've been hearing in the news. But I recommend that we hold another study session at that point, and maybe we do it in person so that we can like draw on the board and stuff like that, even if we have to, you know, wear masks and be distanced. And at that point, we could identify things to put down that we need, that we are realistic, but not committing to anything. That's what the county says. You don't have to commit to these cuts, but just put down something that's realistic. And then when we have even more information in August, because that's when the state will be deciding around deferrals and things like that. When we have more information in August, I recommend that we start a budget advisory committee. We include a bunch of different stakeholders, and then we look at what, if the projection of everything still shows that we need to make cuts in 21, 22, then we would have this advisory committee that would be able to look really closely at what things could be cut and make a recommendation. So that's my.
Tina, can I make one more recommendation?
Sure.
So we talked about this yesterday, but I think in the next couple of months, I'd really like the board to consider, I think this is a good time to form an education foundation. And the board would certainly provide some voice into how any proceeds, how they be used. But I'm thinking when we're talking about reducing supplies and reducing professional development, that you might be thinking in the beginning, getting this foundation up and running and using it for that to kind of fill in. It doesn't really add revenue to Tina's budget, but it helps reduce some of the pain that I think some staff are going to feel. And I do have a little bit of experience in that arena. I don't think that we can raise millions of dollars, but I think we can raise enough that it can help soften the blow on some of these cuts.
Okay.
So we're okay for this coming school year. We're just basically talking about what goes beyond that.
Correct.
But there could be a possibility, and I'm being positive, that it's only a few months and we're going to get back to normal, and we're just basically like preparing for the worst but hoping for the best.
Exactly. And I think
Okay.
you summed it up very well. I don't want to say we're preparing for the worst, because I did not take the very worst situation, but I did take a pretty bad situation. I did take a conservative approach. And so,
conservative approach.
yeah. And so you're correct. For 2021, this coming school year, we are fine with just, cinching things up a bit.
Yeah.
We're not talking about eliminating any positions or doing anything dramatic for the coming school year. But when we turn in our budget for the coming school year, you have to also include the budget for the subsequent 2 years. And that's where we're going to have to identify things that are realistic that we could potentially cut in order for the county to approve our budget.
Right. Okay. I just want to see, I see all the communication between Dr. Delore and all the staff, and basically every communication is like, we are not laying off anybody for the next school year, which is really great, like to kind of reassure everybody. So.
Right. And the information we'll have when we adopt our budget in June is not going to be, I don't think, and we're not going to know enough of the impact of the pandemic to be able to make decisions for 21, 22, and 22, 23. For those 2 years, we're going to have to wait. We're going to have to wait until probably January would be the earliest that we would start committing to anything for the following year.
Right, because I just feel like it's just so hard to predict anything right now, just given the circumstances. It's just so hard to say, like, it could not be that bad, but it also could not be great too. So it was just so unknown, but thanks, Tina.
Any other questions? Do we want
So I definitely think we should have another study session, and it should be in person. I also think we should have a budget advisory committee, but I'm wondering if we could just see if we could engage the return to school committee. And I'll leave this up to Terry, but this is just an idea. Every time we create multiple committees, we're having problems filling positions. And that committee is already going to do a deep dive into needs of the school and would probably have to look at budget. So I don't know if we need to recreate the wheel or try to ask that group if they'd be willing to do some more work.
I think
We just had an orientation meeting today, and I don't want to launch that on them obviously right now, but
Yeah, no, I'm not saying call them today, but I'm saying, you know, whenever we decide, because the budget advisory committee, I wouldn't want to have, after you just told people that we're not going to cut anything, and then we're like, let's put together a budget advisory committee so we can look at cuts, we're just going to set off alarms. So I'm assuming this would be next school year, further, like, you know, closer to, you know, winter of next year or something.
Yeah, I would say August at the earliest, but we could wait until November to start it, and I think that would be fine.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Great.
Yeah, thank you for this. I know this has been extremely challenging, Tina. As it, you know, it's quicksand. You know, I was trying to work with quicksand. So thank you so much for pulling this together. It was very helpful.
You're welcome. Thank you for being such a astute audience.
I'm just thinking out loud here, you know, considering, you know, what we were just talking about the return to school committee, and really still having really no idea, or, you know, it's going to be difficult to imagine what school is going to be like given the current situation. I'm just wondering, how do we think differently about the budget, you know, because a lot of the assumptions you're making are assuming that we're still a normal school district, you know, operationally, but we're really not going to be a normal school district operationally, at least for the foreseeable future, given everything that we're hearing, you know. So, you know, this is where yes, some convergence, I think, needs to be discussed, certainly with the return to school and the budget committee. I mean, I don't know how to quite maybe distill my thoughts, but it's just thinking that they're just, the unknowns are just so you know, so prevalent right in front of us, right? And that we can't assume that even the MYP that we would do under a normal situation would really apply, given that, you know, are we going to be in a bifurcated structure, not just next year, but the following year? I mean, there's so many things outside of our control. I mean, given what we know now, I agree with the way you've budgeted, Tina. I just think that there's just so much that even if we were to sit down in the next study session, we would literally be throwing darts on the board anyway. You know, I mean, if we assume everything's going to be operationally the way it's supposed to in a normal school year, then those make sense. But will these things make sense?
Right. And, you know, in the last recession, that's, even though things were not, you know, so much up in the air, it was still like throwing spaghetti at the wall. It really was, you know, you would say that you were going to make these cuts in the out years, and then the state would come in with some one-time money, or there would be, you know, some other kind of change where you couldn't do that. And so it really doesn't make sense to spend a lot of energy doing things too far in advance. We have to come up with something, because the board, I mean, the county will expect it, or else we'll have to file negative. But it really isn't, it doesn't have to reflect what's really going to happen, because we won't know until we get much closer. I think that Kalima's point of having the committee start in the winter, November, December, I think is the right move, because by then we should have some better idea of what direction our schools are going to be headed in, whether we're nearing the end of the problem or just right in the middle of it.
And then, like, this is to Tina's point, and to talk to what you were saying, Annie, like, this is the reason why multi-year projections are kind of dumb, right? To you, lack of a better word, but because last year, did any of us think we're going to be here, right? I mean, like, none of us in our last budget work study could have thought that we would be sitting here right now, me having gone outside like 4 times in the past, you know, 3 months. Like, this is nuts. So I think really the purpose of the multi-year projection is really so that we can take a deep dive into like, this is how much we're spending on this. This is how much, just so we have that knowledge and go through it. So for whatever scenario comes, we just kind of have a set foundational base of what is key and what we can look at and what we can be flexible with. And then we just, you know, like we're doing now, just doing the best we can. But that's what I really look at the purpose of multi-year projections, just to keep us like a reminder of like, we need to be thinking about these things. But yeah, it's a complete guessing game because none of us could have thought we'd be here. Right?
No, I completely agree. And I, you know, just, you know, this is, you know, I operate in the same way in my world as well. So I completely understand this. You know, it's just a little frustrating, not so, you know, given the situation we're in, right? Not, you know, this is no one's fault other than we're trying to make the best of what is clearly a tough situation. And again, I appreciate that the realism with a tinge of conservatism that's built into all of this, because it does force us to really think deeply about where we're headed. And, you know, and it also just sort of makes me think about, you know, how we're going to find the alternative revenue sources that we really need to find to make all this stuff happen, you know, or at least help mitigate some of this.
Yeah.
I do think that there are some expenses that we can plan on having next year that I don't think are built into the budget. So for example, I know Dr. Morrow is going to be requiring students and staff to wear masks. So with 4,500 students and 450 employees, and you think about having to, I mean, if we can get people to use cloth masks that they wash, but you know, teenagers, I don't know that my son would have started with one mask in the morning and by second period, he would have lost it already. So I'm worried about that. I'm also concerned, it'll be interesting to see his orders around assessing people's health and temperature when to work, or the students. Is he going to require that all staff are having these wellness checks in the morning? There could be some incurred costs there. There could be some incurred sub costs because of changes in leave bills related to COVID-19. So I think we need to keep an eye on all of those as well. My guess is those are all going to be mandated and we're not going to see money for 10 years on some of those expenditures.
Yeah.
That was Pollyanna of me, I'm sorry.
No, it's all, we got real talk. I mean, also transportation. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. How are we going to get kids to school, right? And that was a discussion today in the long-term planning committee, where, you know, Samtrans may be not required to do anything for us anymore. So, you know, who knows what's going to happen there. And then also Dr. Morrow's guidance on hand washing and hand sanitation. I know we had started with trying to get hand sanitizers, but there may be different guidance around that too that they were talking about. And I don't know how much help we're going to get from the county or from outside sources. So yeah, today was a scary day with the updates. Yay.
Well, thank you again. I think, I don't know if we want to set a date for another conversation after the May revise, if we want to get that on the calendars, or if that's something you want to do offline with Candace. I'm not. But this is the only agenda item.
Yeah. Future agenda. I don't know what works best with. Do you guys want to just have Candace email it? Or do you
don't we have a meeting on the 19th? Can we build it into the meeting on the 19th rather than adding another meeting to everyone's schedule?
Sounds good.
Is that okay with you, Tina?
Yeah, it's okay with me.
All right. Any objections to that?
Sure, that works.
Thanks.
So we're going to do that one in person though?
Yep, it's looking like it.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. So the meeting on May 19th is a regular board meeting?
Oh, when is the work study? Sorry.
That's what I'm talking about. Unless we,
Okay.
rather than adding another meeting to everyone's schedule, I would like to do this budget repeat at a regular meeting.
No, can we do it at the LCAP work study?
Well, she won't have the information from the May.
I mean, if we're gonna be doing a deep dive into cuts, I mean, we can talk offline about it. I mean, it's just, I don't know if I want it on YouTube. I mean, I hate to say that because this is on YouTube, but somebody can watch at a later date, take things out of context.
What about if you change your LCAP date
Tina, do you really
to
think
after 19th? What about if you change your LCAP date and then do both in person after the May revise? So you're not adding another meeting.
That's a good idea. I don't think there's much to share for LCAP right now anyway, right? Because that's been the requirement has been postponed.
I was going to share a lot of data, looking really more of deep dive onto our just metrics, but I'd be more than happy to postpone that.
Maybe we make it on the 20th or somewhere around there.
Okay, Candace and I will talk about it tomorrow and get emails out to the board.
May 20th is the student advisory meeting.
Yeah.
I just set around then. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, we could find another date, I guess, offline to move the LCAP budget work study. I mean, yeah.
Okay.
I'll work with Candace on that.
Thank you. All right. So that seems to be the future agenda item, unless there's anything else. Nope. All right. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank
Thanks,
you again,
Tina.
Good night,
Thanks again,
everybody.
Tina.
Tina. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.